Tablighi Jamaat, A House Divided, TJ Terrorism, Richard Reid Case Study, Part 4 of 4. So the third episode, I made 2 claims, and although I gave screenshots, the screenshots were not clear, and the 2 claims specifically are the fact that the TJs are producing half-baked scholarship, and they have a scanty approach to the foundational texts of Islam. I take this from Professor Qasim Zaman's book about Ashraf Ali Thanvi, one of the seminal founders and one of the ideologues behind Deoband, a very prolific author. He writes under a title, The Intellectual Milieu of Deoband. The culmination of madrasa education of Deoband was the reading or the study of the 6 canonical collections of hadith. So these are the foundational texts. However, in double quotes, the review, double quotes, of the canonical collections was thus expected to proceed rapidly within a single academic year. They rushed through the foundational texts, barely being able to absorb them. And then another narrative is given by someone who wrote an account of the study amongst one of the scholars called Mahmud Hassan. So Mahmud Hassan is the scholar, and this is the account that the person gave. A student would read aloud from the hadith collection under review, and the master barely gave a word of explication. The master saying barely a word of explication. This is the people who are talking for the TJs. This is the scholars they produce. And the reason why they go through the hadith in such a haphazard and speedy, rapid manner, in less than an academic year, literally, is because their intent behind this, as it states later on this very page, was to show the concordance between the hadith reports and the norms of their Hanafi school of law. So they don't study the hadith for the sake of the hadith or the sake of understanding or explicating it. They study it to reaffirm the norms of their Hanafi law. And this is a huge topic and a huge area, and I'm sure I'll cover it later on when it comes to studying Ashraf Ali Thanvi. The next claim that I have to clear up and I have to justify is the fact that they are the forefront of violence. The Deobandis are the ones at the forefront of violence. On page 119 of the same book mentioned, Deobandis in Pakistan have exhibited a quite different orientation. Since the mid-80s, Pakistan towns and cities have witnessed much violent sectarian conflict between the Shia, about 15% of the overwhelmingly Muslim population of the country, and the Sunnis and Deobandi organizations have been at the forefront of this violence. There's the claims of Qasim Zaman, and Wali R. Nasser affirms this, and there are other scholars that have studied this as well, Dietrich Rietz, for example, and that's for another series and that's for another episode, but there's the proof. Now we come to Richard Reid. So I recommend you read this Telegraph article, and I'm only going to mention a few points from it because it's about 2,000 words, I'd say. And I will link this with the participant observer study done by Dr. Anthony Baker at the University of Exeter, who actually met Richard Reid. So I will be informed not only by this article, which is written by Olga Craig, but it will also be by a doctor who actually met him and studied this topic. So it's quite authentic. It states, he was trained, this is Richard Reid, in all likelihood in terrorism by Al-Qaeda, probably in Afghanistan. So refer back to the last episode when I spoke about, and I quoted Jason Burke talking about how 400,000 young men and boys were trained in Deobandi sites, Deobandi madrasas. And I gave the reasons why that was attractive to them. And then it states, Reid's parents, and to make a comment here, Baker Dr. Baker actually states that he was in communication with the parents of Reid. They had phoned him, or vice versa. So Salafism, which is promoted by Baker, clearly had a pastoral and a caring approach to Richard Reid. He was not only They were not only interacting with Reid and challenging his views, they were actually caring for him, and they were caring for the relationship that he had with their parents. This is the narrative that deals with extremism. The aunt of Richard Reid said, and in fact the parents both said, they spoke of the conviction that he is not an evil man. Reid's aunt has talked of the lonely lad with an empty life who found solace with his Muslim brothers. So with Salafis, they have a communication with the parents, with the aunt, and his lonely life is addressed. And it's mentioned later on, it states that another convert at that time, his name was Abdullah Anderson, who was 32 years old. Initially, Reid became a model convert. He studied the Quran daily, learning everything he could about his new faith. He changed his name to Abdur Rahim and got a job as a dishwasher in a hotel, and later sold incense in a Brixton store. His father says he hopes that his son would give up crime. His father said he hopes that his son would give up crime, although he admits he, meaning the father, was a poor role model. Abdullah Anderson, who met Reid at the time, said he loved Islam, he wanted to know everything about it, and he was open and friendly. But later on, when he had met Zacharias Moussaoui, a French national, someone else who Dr. Baker had also met, Zacharias Moussaoui was suspected of being the 20th hijacker during the September the 11th attacks. He started shunning Anderson, and he began spending all his time with the secretive extremists. And in 1998, it says, Reid suddenly disappeared from the streets of Brixton and from the mosque. And it mentions later on in this article, which I recommend you to read, it says that Dr. Baker most likely, while interacting with him, had argumentations. Well, not most likely, he did have arguments with him because of the new extremist slant that he was taking. So, where was the incubation where he could incubate these extremist views and harbor them? That was within these camps, which are quite clearly proven now by many sources to be Deobandi camps, where he is not going to be challenged, he is not going to be have pastoral care. And where is his extremism fed and incubated? It's incubated within the TJs. Where is it challenged, and where does he have to leave in order to be extremist? The Salafi mosque. This is the difference between TJs and Salafis. So, to summarize, the TJ are ignorant, and that's proved by Professor Zaman. They are at the forefront of violence, according to Wali Nasser, the forefront of violence in Pakistan, at least he mentions. And the Salafis do not tolerate extremism in any form. And when someone is so extreme that they espouse their views, they they don't eject them, but they physically have to remove themselves from that environment that suffocates them of oxygen, that suffocates their extremist ideas of oxygen. That's the difference between TJs and Salafis. So I want to make this quite emphatic. TJs and Salafis, in regard to terrorism, are like night and day. One is kryptonite for terrorism, i.e., the Salafis, and one, because of its ignorance and its inability to respond, nurtures it and incubates it. Then I bring to the conclusion this fourth part, and we move on and continue with Dr. Pieri's analysis of the TJ. Stay tuned for more episodes.